Hello, YouTube, and welcome to All Good on the Road. Well, the 2024 hurricane season opened with a bang with Hurricane Beryl barreling its way through the Caribbean. See what I did there? It's barrel, and it barreled its way through the. Never mind. But a lot of people are asking a lot of questions right now on how a hurricane can affect my cruise. So let's take a deep dive into that today. As we delve into this video, I'm mainly going to focus on Carnival cruises because that's where my expertise is the strongest, but this advice pretty much goes for any of the cruise lines during hurricane season. So the biggest question I get asked during hurricane season is my cruise going to be canceled? Well, of course, only Carnival decides that along with the port authorities and Coast Guard, but we can look at what's happened in the past and give you some advice on when a cruise might be canceled. The short answer, and it might be surprising to many, is Carnival almost never cancels a cruise because of a hurricane. If they have any possible way to make this cruise happen by changing itinerary, holding the previous cruise for an extra day and boarding you a day late, that's normally what they'll try to do. But seldom doesn't mean never, and sometimes they're forced to cancel a cruise. That scenario is usually that a hurricane has hit the embark port either the day before or the day of your cruise. And the Coast Guard and the port authorities have closed that port for a length of time that makes it inconvenient or impossible to have the cruise you were scheduled for. Later in this video, we'll talk about what compensation Carnival has usually given when they do have to cancel a cruise.
Money back! Money back! Money back! Don't ever say that again!
So if they don't cancel your cruise, what are some other likely scenarios if there's a hurricane close to where you're cruising to? Well, Carnival reserves the right to change ports when necessary. And if they have to, that's what they're going to do. Take a look here at the Carnival Liberty last week. Their port was closed in Belize, so they simply had to circle around in the Gulf of Mexico as they headed back to New Orleans. I really enjoy an extra sea day, so that wouldn't be a big deal to me. But if missing a port that you had planned on your cruise is a very big deal to you, then that's a reason to maybe not cruise during hurricane season. There's certainly a much higher possibility to miss a port during hurricane season than other times of the year. Another thing to keep in mind during hurricane season is that the effects of these hurricanes don't reach out as far as people often think they do. Take a look here at Hurricane Beryl. Big scary graphic on the map, but in reality, the Jubilee was still right here when this satellite image was taken, and the seas in Cozumel were only about a foot. Here's an image Thursday morning, though, July 4th, showing the ships fleeing the area. They knew when it was time to go. To recap, Carnival's going to do its best during a hurricane to go around it, find other ports for you, and just give you the best week it can while staying away from that hurricane. So we've established that it's unlikely that they're going to cancel our cruise, and they're going to take us somewhere, even if they move our ports around a little bit. But is it going to be rough seas during hurricane season? And the answer, unfortunately, is yes, much more often than not during hurricane season.
I told you I get seasick.
Now, the captains are going to do all they can to keep you in areas where there are less waves, less wind on the leeward side of islands, things like that.
There it is. We're doing 1.62 knots and 3 kilometers an hour. So we are basically just sitting in the ocean. But why not? He has like 50 miles to make it to Bimini tomorrow morning. So yeah, he's just found a nice calm spot in the ocean and moving along extremely slow.
But every once in a while, they're just going to have to make that run back to port, and they're going to have to keep their timeline. And sometimes that means during hurricane season, it's going to get very rough. And if rough seas are something you are very susceptible to, hurricane season might not be the best season of cruising for you. Pick your cabin low and in the center of the ship if you're susceptible to seasickness. And what works well for us is a boning the night before the cruise and every night of the cruise.
I finally got over my seasickness.
A scenario we haven't discussed is what happens if there's a hurricane between you and your port. In those cases, Carnival simply waits, and you get an extra sea day. For some people, that's great. You know, an extra sea day, free cruise day. But for others, it's not so great. You've got kids at home, pets, maybe you've got to get back to work the next day. Unfortunately, it's out of the hands of Carnival and yourself, and you've just got to wait until they can safely get back to the port. In these cases, you may be returning to port to a flooded car, or even worse, a damaged car. If there's a hurricane in the map that has any chance at all of going to your port while you're gone, consider where you're going to park. Not at ground level, maybe even off-site or further inland, and pay a little extra to get to the port. So let's get back to the rare cases in which Carnival is going to cancel your cruise. The hurricane's bearing down on your port and it's just not going to happen. I see people all the time about a week out asking if their cruise is going to be canceled. Carnival does not make these decisions usually until within about 48 hours of the storm hitting the port. Take a look here at Hurricane Ian, and then this update from John Heald. They only canceled this about 48 hours before it was going to hit. They're not going to make that decision much farther out. Hurricanes just have a tendency to make big changes in trajectory sometimes before they make landfall. Let's talk about compensation. If you do get on your cruise and you have terribly rough seas or you miss ports, you can expect no compensation for that from Carnival.
You're afraid to get wet.
They try to make it clear that that can happen and it's out of their control, and they're not going to compensate you for those kind of problems.
Dang it.
But in the eventuality that your cruise is actually canceled because of a hurricane, you never make it to it. Normally what Carnival's been doing in the last few years is a full refund and a 25% future cruise credit. Now that can be a problem for some people, as you want to get to your port early. You don't want to show up the day of. So you may already have airfare and hotel, and unfortunately there is no compensation normally for that unless you have insurance for the cruise. So that's something also to consider during hurricane season. You could be out those expenditures and not make it to your cruise and not get those refunded by Carnival. Keep in mind that if you booked your hotel and airfare with a good travel credit card, they usually cover these eventualities. Another question I hear a lot is, should I cruise during hurricane season? Well, I do. I have a cruise mid-September this year, and we cruise every year during hurricane season. We don't let hurricanes slow us down a bit, and we've never had a cruise canceled and never had an itinerary impacted because of a hurricane. Has that ever happened to you? Are you worried about cruising during hurricane season? I'd love to hear your stories about cruising during hurricane season. Thanks for watching.